Alison Morgan in Llanelli wants to say Happy Valentine's Day to Brian Malcolm. And Claire Ellen from Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire would like to say, I love you to Stuart.
Love is in the air, everywhere I look around.
Valentine's Day, 1989. All around Britain, couples were sending each other tokens of their love.
What we're doing today is playing every record a love song for St. Valentine's Day.
3,000 miles and 3 time zones ahead in Iran, the chargé d'affaires at the British Embassy was entering into the spirit of the day.
We were all opening our St. Valentine's Day cards, and I went back to my house in the compound.
At that moment, Radio Tehran was broadcasting a message of an entirely different sentiment. A fatwa, an Islamic legal opinion, direct from the country's spiritual leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. Its target was Salman Rushdie, author of the novel The Satanic Verses.
I didn't fully understand what was being said, but there was something about a fatwa, F-A-T-W-A, I think. I called the head of our Middle East department in London and said to him, I think you should look at the tapes. There's something like called a fatwa, and it's going to cause a lot of trouble.
Back in Britain, the BBC's monitoring station just outside London picked up the fatwa and relayed it to its newsrooms.
It came in as a piece of news on a wire service, and somebody said, oh, it's something interesting from Tehran.
I'll be talking to him in a moment, and we've got him up, so we'll do him now.
The Ayatollah's extraordinary attack and his virtual order to Shiite extremists to attack Mr. Rushdie was reported on Tehran radio this morning. And we rang him, and we told him that he'd been sentenced to death. The World at One broke news of it to Salman Rushdie. I asked him whether he was taking the threat to him seriously.
I think I have to take them very seriously indeed.
Will you be looking to the British authorities in any form for any kind of protection as a result of this
I think
threat?
I must. I think honestly, I've just heard the news, and obviously that is something I may well have to think about.
My room was at the top of my house, and I went down the stairs several at a time and locked the front door and shut the shutters, and thought to myself, in a very strange way, detached way, which I suppose is only accounted for by shock, that I wondered how many days or hours I had left to live.
Within hours, Rushdie would disappear into a world of safe houses and secret locations, accompanied everywhere by round-the-clock special protection, a way of life he would endure for nearly 10 years. What was it about this novel that pushed Rushdie's life to the edge and created an international crisis, the like of which has never been seen before or since? This is the extraordinary story of the Satanic Verses affair. Six months before the fatwa, Salman Rushdie was at the pinnacle of his career. His 4th novel was about to be published. He hoped it would repeat the success of his second, Midnight's Children.
The winner of this year's Booker Prize is Salman Rushdie.
And his third, Shame, also a bestseller. With literary acclaim, wealth, celebrity, and a glamorous American wife, Rushdie seemed to have it all.
He just went to parties, as far as I can see, the whole time. He was sort of out every night, and he's got great, social enthusiasm. And he really likes girls. And they really like him too, actually.
But Rushdie's novels had also earned him enemies. His caricature of the Indian Premier, Mrs. Gandhi, in Midnight's Children, led to her taking out a libel suit against him. Pakistan's President Zia-ul-Haq was so offended by the portrayal of himself in shame, he banned the book.
We thought of him as one of the few writers who was actually what we would now call a public intellectual.
It's very nice when novels are dangerous. It seems to me that art happens at the edge.
He was extremely good on platform. He was always doing battle against racism and for minorities, as well as somebody who produced these extraordinary books.
Rushdie's next novel, The Satanic Verses, would be his most ambitious to date. This highly complex exploration of migration and the loss of faith spans 547 pages. It had taken him 5 years to write. Viking Penguin Books paid a record $850,000 for the rights. The main plot centers on the adventures of two Indian actors, Gibril and Saladin, who fall to earth in Britain when their plane explodes. Miraculously, they survive. But Gibril begins to fantasize that he's an angel, while Saladin takes on the physical characteristics of the devil.
For me, it was a book about this extraordinary place that London was, in this moment when it was clear that it was a multicultural city, where people who landed here as if they had fallen from a great height into this strange environment had a pretty rough time.
In the novel, Rushdie takes a swipe at the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Thatcher, calling her Mrs. Torture, and the police, who beat up Saladin in the back of a police van.
When they pulled his pajamas down in the windowless police van and he saw the thick, tightly curled dark hair covering his thighs, Saladin Chamcha broke down for the second time that night. This time, however, he began to giggle hysterically, infected perhaps by the continuing hilarity of his captors. The 3 immigration officers were in particularly high spirits, and it was one of these who had debagged Saladin with a merry cry of "Opening time, Paki! Let's see what you're made of!"
But as with all his novels, Rushdie was venturing into new and controversial territory. This time, the religious mythology of Islam. Rushdie was born into a liberal Muslim family in Bombay in 1947.
I ceased to be formally religious at quite an early age. I mean, it's a teenager, I suppose, and I've never changed. I've never been born again, so to speak. But I've always remained. There's always been this nagging space where the religion used to be.
I think the extent of Salman's religious upbringing would have been once a year he was taken to the mosque on Eid, I suppose in quotes to pray, but when he asked what he should do, and he was told that when they go down, you go down, when they get up, you get up.
Nevertheless, Rushdie found himself drawn to a disputed episode in the birth of Islam, known as the Satanic Verses. Rushdie came across the story while he was studying Islamic history at Cambridge University.
I've discovered that in some, but not all, of the traditions of the Prophet, there exists this strange story, which is a kind of story of temptation, in which Muhammad was offered some kind of a deal.
In the early days of Islam, Prophet Muhammad had trouble winning over converts to his new religion with its single God. According to the story, Muhammad was tricked by the devil into a compromise. He told the people of Mecca that they could also worship their favorite pagan goddesses. But when the angel Gabriel later revealed Satan's evil deed, the so-called Satanic Verses were removed from the Quran. Many Muslims don't believe the incident ever took place. The Satanic Verses form the subplot of the novel. Rushdie creates a fictional and flawed prophet who he calls Mahound, the derogatory term the early Crusaders gave to Muhammad. It means devil or false prophet. The city of Mecca becomes Jahiliyyah, the name given to the pagan time of ignorance before Islam.
They're visionary sequences. They're not intended to have the validity of a kind of historical event because they happen in somebody's dream. So obviously in a dream things change. Names change, places change shape. Nothing is as it really is in life. And I wanted those sequences to have that kind of visionary quality. And so quite deliberately did not call the city Makkah. I did not call Muhammad Muhammad because I didn't want it to be a picture of him, but a kind of dream of him.
It's not the first time a writer had questioned the divine nature of Islam, but none had been so bold as to use the contentious satanic verses as the basis for a novel. Rushdie sent proof copies to his friends and family to read.
I found it impossible to not be afraid because the tradition, the orthodoxy and the fear of anybody pushing open those doors, I understood that it would be contentious, that he would make some people cross.
I knew when I read the book that Salman was completely aware of stirring a controversy within Islam. It was mischief, and it was deliberate, magic, realistic mischief. What I said to Salman is, you'll be shuffling from TV studio to TV studio defending your views against the mullahs. And he said, ha, bring it on.
Events were about to move to Rushdie's birthplace, India. In the summer of 1988, Rushdie also sent a copy of the book to a friend in Delhi, the writer Madhu Jain.
What was a bit strange was he was worried about how this book would be received in the United States. He was thinking of what one said, black Muslims at that time. He was worried about that. And then we told him, look, don't worry about them, worry about the subcontinent. We said it's going to come from here. And he didn't seem to take it in.
Rushdie's publisher, Viking Penguin, had just set up a subsidiary in Delhi. The manuscript was sent to its distinguished editorial advisor, the writer Khushwant Singh, to consider publication for the massive Indian market.
I went through the manuscript and advised against it, and for good reasons. I found two references in the novel which I thought would not be acceptable to the Muslims. One was about the Quran, and the other one was about the Prophet's wives.
In one of the passages, Rushdie's deranged character, Gibril, dreams about a brothel called the Curtain. The Arabic translation is the hijab, the traditional Muslim head covering for women. The brothel's 12 prostitutes take on the names and the personalities of the Prophet's wives.
When the news got around Jahilia that the whores of the Curtain had each assumed the identity of one of Mahoun's wives, the clandestine excitement of the city's males was intense. The men of Jahilia flocked to the Curtain, which experienced a 300% increase in business.
I'm an agnostic. I don't have any feelings about God or religion of any kind, but with no excuse whatsoever to have a brothel with the women named after the Prophet's wives. So that was sheer bad taste.
Islam is based on the belief that the Quran is the direct word of God, revealed through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. In Rushdie's novel, one of his characters, Salman, suspects that the Prophet Mahound is making up the revelations to advance his own cause.
Salman began to notice how useful and well-timed the angel's revelations tended to be, so that when the faithful were disputing Mahound's views on any subject, from the possibility of space travel to the permanence of hell, the angel would turn up with an answer. And he always supported Mahound.
I suggested that unless they were taken out, I don't think there should be an Indian edition. Otherwise, there'd be no Penguin India left. I know the reactions of my Muslim brethren better than the Muslim-born Salman Rushdie. There's a well-known adage, you say anything you like about God, but beware of what you say about Prophet Muhammad.
Unknown to Rushdie, Penguin backed down and abandoned plans for an Indian version. However, they were still planning to export the British version to the Indian market. In mid-September, Rushdie gave interviews to the Indian press.
I had this sort of inside information and I put it to Rushdie and I asked him if he knew that Penguin India was actually not going to publish his book and that it could be controversial. And he was very surprised. He didn't know about it. And he said, I haven't heard about this. And it's a strange view of the world to think that a book can cause riots. I was actually a little surprised because, you know, coming from India as I did, I knew that the slightest thing causes a riot in India. So I asked him again, I said, but isn't the situation in India quite delicate? And he says, no. He spoke about why he'd written the book. I mean, he said, I believe that, you know, we need to discuss everything. Nobody is above discussion and criticism, and whether it's the Prophet or whether it's Islam or religion.
Shrabani Basu's article was leapt on by a leading Indian Muslim campaigner.
The moment I read it, I felt it was hot potatoes.
He immediately lobbied government ministers and demanded the book be banned.
I was concerned with this troublesome anticipation that this book is a bundle of troubles. They're going to set the country on fire. It's going to spill blood. And the sufferers will be ourselves. Therefore, I went and begged the government, please, stop it.
Days later, the Satanic Verses was published in Britain to mixed reviews. Back in India, heated debates were taking place in Parliament. With elections looming the following year, the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi could not afford to alienate India's 100 million Muslims. The Indian government caved in and banned the book. Within weeks, India's action was followed by 10 other countries in Africa and Asia.
I thought India brought some kind of shame upon itself by doing that. For Salman, it was not a good thing to happen because it kind of put it center stage on an international. It made other people take notice where they may not have. And I think it did start something.
Before long, Muslim activists in India were warning their friends in Britain about the book. First to take action was the Islamic Foundation in Leicester. They photocopied the offending passages and sent copies to Islamic organizations, embassies and mosques throughout Britain.
You'll find vast majority of Muslims may never have read the book. We got to know of the book through news reports, through Muslim publications, and through excitable discussions after prayers at the mosque.
At that time, I did not read the book, but I read those paragraphs which were highlighted for me. But because some of my colleagues read it, and their response was that it is not a readable piece of material. It is insulting, it is abusive.
I was very angry that someone brought up in an Indian Muslim family who must have known just how deep the love of the Prophet goes in Islamic families, how they're taught from a very young age to love the Prophet more than their own selves, their own families. This was not a work of simple imagination. It seemed to me to be a targeted attempt to vilify and cause outrage.
One Muslim leader who did read the book was a Harley Street dentist, Hesham El-Asawi.
I worked on it
every spare time that I had, about 6 hours a day. It took me a record 3 weeks to finish, the hard going. It was hard going. I actually suggested to my friends that there should be a prize for people who finish reading the Satanic verses.